Hello. Welcome back. 2026 is here. Sorry, we're delayed in our first live Q&A of the year. We are hopefully transitioning to do this time like 2-ish on a Monday as a regular slot. Instead, previously we were doing Thursdays, and just it can be very busy. I mean, every day it is very busy, but we figured that Monday 2 o'clock ahead of the madness of the Dáil on a Tuesday starting is going to be our new slot, certainly for the next few weeks. See how we get on. So tell all your friends and family if they want to ask any questions of me about happenings in the Dáil, in our movements in society. Come on to any of the various social media platforms at 2 o'clock on a Monday, and I should be going live pretty much every Monday. I think we will be more successful in maintaining this. What I was going to try and speak about today, obviously mostly, is answer people's questions. There's obviously a huge amount happening, and did happen in the course of the last few weeks. It's been already a very hectic and disorientating start of the year for people, I think, and a global picture. Trump doing what he's doing in terms of kidnapping the president of Venezuela, his wife Celia Flores, killing about 100 people, and basically the world, certainly the Western world, just says, oh right, yes, international law, and continue. The threats to Greenland, which have now escalated, proving that appeasement of Trump definitely doesn't work. And I don't know if you've read the latest about his idea of this horrific board of deputies thing board of peace, that is effectively a colonial viceroy system for Gaza, which will have him, Tony Blair, etc. But he's now kind of expanding that to be a replacement for the UN as a whole, ruled by Trump for life. And if you want to be on it, you have to pay $1 billion to him. It's just like the most blatant thing in the world. So that's been happening obviously at a global level, but then here, something I've been trying to have a focus on over the course of the last week in the Dáil, and I'm going to try again next week. Hey, Lynn, is talking about Paschal Donohoe. So there's a scandal, don't know if people know about, but basically there's a scheme that Ireland gives money to, organised by the World Bank, and the World Bank looked for a certain amount of money, which was an increase in the money they got previous years. They looked for 131.4 million, and the Department of Finance set out a series of options of, well, we could give them nothing, we could give them less than that, we could give them 131, or we could do more, we could give them more if we wanted. And in the end, the Irish government agreed to give them an extra 10 million euros. That's obviously not the government's money, that's public money. The government agreed to do it. So the Minister for Finance, Paschal Donohoe, we'll come back to him in a second, he proposed we should give them 141.4 million euros. They said thanks very much, pocketed the money, used it for whatever the scheme is for. But the kicker here is that, of course, we know about 6 months later, Paschal Donohoe resigned his seat in the Dáil, resigned as being a minister, and went to a very high-paying job, almost 600,000 euros a year, at the top of the World Bank. So you have a situation where the public paid 10 million euros unnecessarily, not even asked for by the World Bank, against the advice of the senior civil servants. And then the guy who's the minister who proposed it then gets a job with the institution that got the 10 million euros. It absolutely stinks. And I raised it in the Dáil twice last week. First of all, I got an answer from, you can check these are on our social media. I got an answer from Micheál Martin, who said, I have a note here and it tells me that actually the 141 million, that was the low option. That was the low option, you see. But then I got the actual internal documents, the briefing paper that they were referring to from the Department of Finance, and it was very clear that this was the higher option, not the low option, of course, because it was more money than they were even looking for. So I was able to go back to Micheál Martin and say, are you going to correct the record? He kind of bumbled and kind of fumbled his way through the answer, and then afterwards told the journalist basically that, we didn't really say it was the low option anywhere. yeah. James says nobody gives AF. I think people are annoyed about this. I think the more people that become aware about that, we paid 10 million euros completely unnecessarily, unrequested to the World Bank. And then later on, Paschal Donohoe got a job with them. I think people will be pretty annoyed. Solidarity for Venezuela, solidarity for Ukraine, solidarity for Palestine, solidarity for ordinary people in Iran. We're absolutely consistent on these things. This is in response to Aaron asking about this. What we're also consistent about is opposing imperialism, oppression, whether it comes from the US, whether it comes from Britain, whether it comes from Germany, whether it comes from China, whether it comes from Russia, no matter where it comes from, and standing on the side of ordinary people. Why refuse to collab for Zelensky, Paul? Please, I'm just confused, man, because we don't politically agree with Zelensky. Zelensky's a right-wing politician who has sold off most of his the resources of the people of Ukraine in an awful deal with Trump, who has spent his time calling for more and more weapons to be thrown into Ukraine that hasn't resulted in victories for the Ukrainian people or the defeat of the Russian imperialist intervention, and instead has effectively become an agent of US imperialism, which is having their own conflict with Russia, and they're using the Ukrainian people as like victims in that, as the people who are paying the price. They're fighting for the blood of the last Ukrainian, so we disagree with Zelensky, but we stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people who are resisting Russian occupation. And we don't get this idea that in a parliament we're just meant to clap for people who don't agree with, we just don't agree with that. I do, Ollie. I do need an admin for that. The other thing I was going to mention is about all the scandal, obviously, around the AI basically like AI functioning as a child sexual abuse imagery factory. That's what has been happening. 160,000 images created in just one 24-hour period in the first week of January. And that wasn't some exceptional period. Like, that's how much that Grok was being used for so-called like nudification. Like, that's what was happening on Grok. And it was interesting because I think a bit like some of the Greenland stuff, it like, the Irish government, all they want to do is bow down to big tech corporations. They want to appease big tech. They want to appease Trump. That's what they want to do. But then it's so bad. Do you know what I mean? That they're then under pressure to do something. So they're kind of balancing this situation where the public is outraged that one of the richest men in the world, Elon Musk, is making money, because that's what he did after it was pressure about it. Then he said, you won't be able to do it anymore unless you pay us, unless you have a blue tick or whatever it is these days. So you're subscribing to X, then you'll be able to access this feature to create child sexual abuse imagery and abuse imagery of women. Horrific. But the government is like a big booster of big tech. Want to say AI is just great. Micheál Martin was going on about how this is the fourth industrial revolution, or it's as significant as the development of the printing press. Like, really stuff that's just directly out of the propaganda machine of big tech. But then they're under pressure. So the question is, and it's the question we've been asking, is this is clearly against the law to produce child sexual abuse imagery. There's a child pornography law where obviously it's illegal. And why haven't the guards gone in and begun a serious investigation into X, who are allowing this to happen? And originally, your man, the minister, I always forget his name. I'll find him. Someone's typing it to me now. Oh, anyway, no, it didn't come through. The minister who's responsible, the media minister, his name will come to me. He said, this is up to the individual. It's nothing to do with X, basically, which is crazy. It's a machine which is creating these imagery. it's Grok that is putting them up online. They are responsible for it, and yet they're trying to say it's an individual thing. Patrick O'Donovan, that is his name. Thank you, backroom team. But then the government came under more and more pressure. Then the Guard said they were investigating, etc. And then eventually Musk said, "Oh, well, you can't do it anymore." But actually what he said is, it kind of came across to people as you can't do it anymore. He actually said it's being geolocated, geo-blocked. So you can't do it now in a country where it's illegal to create child sexual abuse imagery. But if you're in a country where it isn't legal, or for example, if you have a VPN, you can just pretend you're in that other country and you'll be able to continue to do it. So it's an absolute joke, and it poses a fundamental question to this government, to all of us, about, are we just going to allow these big tech billionaires just run the world for how they want? Their workers massively exploited. I was on a picket line of Covalent workers, mostly content moderators for Facebook and Instagram last Friday. They're on strike again this week, I think on Thursday. Are we just going to allow these people to rule the world? We've got a bill we're introducing on Thursday to stop social media algorithms for children, to protect children from these social media algorithms, which pushes people within minutes of setting up accounts. If you're identified as a young woman, you are targeted with stuff promoting eating disorders, promoting self-harm, horrendous stuff. If you're a young man, you're promoted misogynistic stuff, like Andrew Tate type stuff, far right stuff, very, very quickly, without showing an interest in any of these things. We need to turn off the toxic social media algorithms for under 18s and turn them off by default for over 18. So you can choose to opt in if you want, but it's your choice to do it. Let me just... Cyril the Squirrel, can you name all the ministers? Leanne says, why don't you put the same energy into helping your own country and its homeless people against the government? Hi, Leanne. I put the most effort I can into organising against the government on the housing crisis. I presume you know that we've been to the fore of all the trying to build a housing movement. I had a meeting just this morning about building a big campaign in South Dublin County Council about organising against the attempt to hike up the rents for council tenants. We're going to have big campaigning coming up. The government's change to the rent pressure legislation is coming up, which means they're going to hike up people's rents even faster. This is like designed for landlords legislation. And the biggest thing, of course, is saying we need not to be just throwing money at these around the world. You can get some money from the World Bank. In exchange, you have to do all these kind of right-wing economic policies. That's essentially the deal, and Ireland is tied in to that. Absolutely, Regan. If people have an issue with housing, they need to stop voting for the two parties that refuse to build. I mean, they do. I agree. But we also can't just wait for the next election. I mean, now there's more than 16,000 people in emergency accommodation. It's gone up and up and up. And it's going up at a faster and faster rate. So in 2016, I remember distinctly in the general election, there was less than 5,000 people homeless. And it was a scandal then. By 2020 general election, there was over 10,000. By 2024 general election, there was over 15,000. Now we're on track by the next general election. There'll be well over 20,000. And the government has kind of normalised it. And then with their friends in the far right, done a job on people to make people think, oh no, it's not the government's fault. It's not the developers, it's not the landlords, it's not all the people who are making money from the housing crisis. Not their fault. Oh no, it's poor people who are living on the streets or in really inadequate asylum centre accommodation, which is even worse than the homeless accommodation for mostly Irish people. And I think that's horrendous. We need to get people mobilised, organised together to demand rent controls, to bring rents down to affordable levels, to demand the building of public and affordable housing on a massive scale, and to demand an eviction ban. Since the evictions have been allowed, no fault, using Shannon Airport, for all the crimes they commit around the world, they shouldn't have the free run of our airspace as they currently do. The problem, Ollie, we're going to find whatever ways we can to pursue it. The problem is the government used their majority on the Finance Committee to block calling in Paschal, Donohoe and the ministers to discuss this. They blocked it. and they'll try and use their majority everywhere. Yeah. How the new Frisbee Panda, can you write later, the new rent control bill is actually detrimental to renters, please? Because it allows, so at the moment there's a rent pressure zone, and there's rent caps that apply on everybody. You can't have rent increases of more than 3% a year, or inflation, depending on which is higher. That is going to be the case in the future with the new legislation, but only within 6-year tenancies. So every 6 years, that will reset, and rents will be able to reset to the market rate. So you get a 3%, 3%, 3%, 3%, 3%, and then, we're behind the market rate, 25% increase. So rents, they're going to now go up in like big jumps every 6 years. That's the consequence of that. It's horrendous. If we get a socialist government, in Orange Man, will do a regime change on us. I mean, I think that's like property, because their payments cut recently. I think I've been the only one raising that in the Dáil. But I think this idea that we're going to triple military spending in the next few years, it's a fool's errand. There's no way a country like Ireland, with the size of our economy, the size of our population, can ever compete with the US, Britain, China, Russia, whoever you want to talk about. We can't build a sufficient military to be able to deter any of these people. Our best defence is our neutrality. So instead of throwing money at the military-industrial complex, people who are getting rich from wars, we should actually be investing our money in housing, in the health service, in services for kids with additional needs, all the desperate things that we need in this country, instead of just giving it away to these armaments corporations. And our best defence, in terms of what Amberley is saying, is to be just consistently neutral, consistently calling out oppression, imperialism, no matter whether it's someone who Micheál Martin considers as one of our quote-unquote allies or not. How do we get critical mass to push back and compete with those who continue to vote in Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael? I think the most important thing that'll make a difference is building movements, where people get a sense of their own power and get a sense things can be different. Because the best weapon the establishment have is the sense that there is no alternative. You might want things to be different. You might think things should be different, but they can't be. Writing economic assessments for government and latest paper on green energy parks, all driven by big tech and the wind industry. Can we call out this conflict of interest? Yes, definitely. 100%. What are your thoughts on the whole Europe versus USA, Paul? Is Ireland in trouble if it escalates? I think the Irish political establishment have a problem now, to be honest, whereby they to some degree have been a kind of agent of the US within Europe. They're more connected to the US in terms of foreign direct investment and so on. But now, like, Trump is being so, he's talking about taking Greenland. That presents them with the problem. Like, their preferred strategy of appeasement is no longer there. I think as socialists, we need to make sure that we're representing the interests of ordinary working class people in Ireland, across Europe, and in America. We stand, there's like competing capitalist interests on both sides of the Atlantic. We have a different position, which is the position of ordinary working class people. That's who we are representing. So when we think about what should be a response to what Trump is saying, like, I think something important is to say, like the Shannon Airport example in Ireland. Like, why on earth are they still using Shannon Airport? But right across Europe, the US have so many military bases. Why do they have military bases? And calling for things like that to be ended, and to stop the appeasement, as opposed to measures that will end up hurting ordinary people. And just fly through some final question. Take care. In opposition, okay. City West. I was out in City West this morning, meeting people. There's a new proposal up in Boherboy. This is just a disaster. City West is a disaster. So lots of very nice people living there, but like, it's a product of pro-developer planning, where they went away around the local area plan, which is now completely outdated. They did these strategic housing developments. They threw up apartment blocks, mostly built to rent, threw loads and loads of people in without providing services, without providing community infrastructure. It's a crazy model. And the consequence is the traffic gridlock, the absence of still a proper community centre with a hall and everything else. It really, and the idea that they're just going to keep doing that is we're going to oppose that. Maybe, I don't know, I mean, we spoke up repeatedly for the industrial school hunger strikers. I'm actually having a Zoom call with one of them in 20 minutes about doing on a related issue. So the left was not quiet on that. Hey, Gemma. I mean, I think on cannabis legalization, and I maybe leave it on this, is obviously, like, so Gino Kenny was chairing the of Times in the Dáil. I went out to speak to them. One of the first days I was there was chatting to them. So you've the wrong end of the stick if you think that the left wasn't standing up for those. All right. Take care. Fair play to you. Like I said at the start, we're going to try and do Mondays at 2:00 from now on. So put it in your calendar. Set a reminder for yourself. Come on. Have an old chat. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.